Daniel spent the next 2 days in a guest chamber in the royal palace. It was beautiful, with walls that glowed with soft light and furniture that adjusted to his human form. But he barely noticed any of it. He was too busy thinking about the choice before him. Ambassador Hayes came to visit him on the first evening. She sat across from him and studied his face with those sharp eyes. "You are actually considering it," she said. It was not a question. Daniel nodded. Kithri was curled up in his lap, sleeping peacefully. The other 2 larvae were nearby, watching him with curious eyes. "It is madness," Hayes said. "You would be giving up everything. Earth, your career, any chance of a normal human life." "What normal life?" Daniel asked quietly. "I have nothing waiting for me back home. No family. No one who would miss me if I never returned." Hayes was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. "I looked up your file. Your wife died 6 years ago. You never remarried. Never had children." "We tried," Daniel said. "It never happened. And then she got sick, and there was no more time." He stroked Kithri's back gently. She made a soft sound in her sleep and pressed closer to him. "These creatures need me," he said. "That one in particular. She chose me, for some reason I do not understand. How can I walk away from that?" Hayes leaned forward. "There is something else you should consider. If you stay here, you will become a symbol, a bridge between our species. Your presence in the Queen's court could do more for human-Velkari relations than 1,000 treaties." Daniel looked at her sharply. "Is that what you want me to do? Stay here for political reasons?" "No," Hayes said, and there was unexpected warmth in her voice. "I want you to do what is right for you. But if you do decide to stay, you should know that it will matter to both our peoples." On the morning of the treaty ceremony, Daniel made his decision. The ceremony was held in a great amphitheater at the heart of the Hive City. Thousands of Velkari filled the seats, and a delegation of human officials stood on a platform facing the Queen's throne. The air was thick with anticipation. Daniel walked down the central aisle alone. He was dressed in simple clothes, the same kind he had always worn, because he saw no reason to pretend to be something he was not. Kithri was cradled in his arms, and the other 2 larvae followed behind him. Carried by attendants, he stopped before the Queen and bowed. "Daniel Carter," the Queen said, and her voice filled the amphitheater. "You have had time to consider my offer. What is your answer?" Daniel looked up at her. He thought about Clara one last time. He imagined her face, her smile, the way she used to laugh at his terrible jokes. He hoped she would understand. He hoped she would be proud. "I accept," he said. "I will stay. I will be the guardian of your young, for as long as I am able." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Queen's eyes seemed to soften, though Daniel could not be sure. "There is one condition," he added. The amphitheater fell silent. No one had ever placed conditions on the Queen. "Speak," Sirathon said. "I want my position to mean something beyond this palace," Daniel said. "I want to be a bridge between our peoples. Let me teach your young about humanity, and let me share Velkari wisdom with mine. Let this be the beginning of true understanding, not just a treaty signed by officials who will never speak again." The Queen considered this for a long moment. Then she rose from her throne and descended the steps until she stood before Daniel. "You are bold for a worker caste," she said. "But I see now that your caste means nothing. What you are is written in your actions, not your title." She turned to face the crowd and the human delegation. "Today we sign a treaty of trade and peace between the Velkari Empire and the human species," she announced. "But we also mark another beginning. This human, Daniel Carter, has proven something that my people believed impossible. He has shown that compassion can transcend blood and species. He has shown that the instinct to protect the young is not a weakness. but the greatest strength a being can possess. She looked at the human officials, and her voice grew stronger. Because of him, because of what he did without thought of reward or survival, I am altering the terms of the treaty. Humanity will receive full trading rights in Valkyrie space. You will have access to our medical technology and our sciences. And in return, you will share with us the one thing you possess that we lack, your capacity for love that knows no boundaries. Ambassador Hayes stepped forward, her eyes wide with surprise. Your Majesty, this is far more generous than anything we discussed. It is what is deserved, the Queen said simply. Daniel Carter asked for nothing when he shielded my children with his body. He expected nothing, and yet he gave everything. Such a being deserves a reward worthy of his sacrifice. The treaty was signed that day, with terms that would shape the relationship between humans and Valkyrie for generations to come. But to Daniel, the most important moment came later. After the crowds had dispersed and the officials had returned to their ships, he sat in the garden outside the palace, surrounded by alien flowers that glowed with bioluminescence. Kithri was in his lap, wide awake now, looking at him with those huge dark eyes. You know, he said to her, where I come from, people think I am nobody special. Just a guy who fixes broken machines. A guy who could not save his wife and could not have children of his own. Kithri made a soft chirping sound and reached up to touch his face with her tiny limb. But maybe, Daniel continued, maybe being special is not about where you come from or what you do for a living. Maybe it is about what you are willing to do for others. 6 months later, Daniel stood in a classroom that had been specially built for him in the palace. Before him sat 24 Valkyrie larvae, including Kithri and her 2 siblings. They watched him with eager eyes as he held up a small device that projected images into the air. Today, he said, I am going to teach you a song from my world. It is a song that human parents sing to their children when they are scared or lonely or just need to know that someone loves them. He began to sing, his voice soft and slightly off-key. It was a simple lullaby, one his grandmother had sung to him when he was small. One Clara had loved to hear before she fell asleep. The larvae listened in silence. Then, one by one, they began to hum along. The sound was strange, not quite the melody Daniel was singing, but something beautiful in its own way. A harmony between 2 species that had never spoken before. Commander Vethamer watched from the doorway. Beside him stood Queen Cirithan herself, hidden in the shadows so as not to disturb the lesson. He is changing them, Vethamer said quietly. I can see it. They are learning to love the way humans love. Good, the Queen said. Perhaps that is what we have always needed. Perhaps that is what the galaxy has always needed. She turned and walked away, leaving the human teacher to sing to her children. And in that moment, Daniel Carter finally understood that he had found what he had been searching for ever since Clara died. He had found a family. He had found a purpose. He had found home. The throne room was the largest enclosed space Daniel had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, and the walls stretched away on either side until they became hazy with distance. Thousands of Valkyrie filled the chamber, standing in orderly rows on either side of a central aisle that led to a raised platform at the far end. And on that platform sat Queen Cirithan. She was enormous, easily 3 times the size of any Valkyrie Daniel had seen before. Her body was covered in iridescent scales that shifted color as she moved, cycling through shades of gold and purple and deep blue. Her eyes were like polished obsidian, dark and depthless, and they fixed on Daniel the moment he entered the room. Daniel remembered to bow. He bent at the waist and held the position for a count of 3, just as Hayes had instructed him. When he straightened, the Queen was still watching him with that unreadable gaze. Come forward, human, she said. Her voice was deep and resonant, filling the entire chamber without effort. The translator in Daniel's ear rendered her words in English. But there was something beneath the translation, something ancient and powerful that made his bones vibrate. He walked down the central aisle, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Hayes and the other human diplomats remained at the entrance, too far away to help him now. He stopped at the base of the platform and bowed again. "You may speak," the Queen said. "Tell me your name and your function." "My name is Daniel Carter," he said. His voice sounded small in the vast space, but he kept it steady. "I am a maintenance engineer on the human diplomatic vessel." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "A worker caste," she said. "Not a warrior. Not a leader. And yet you placed yourself between my offspring and those who would harm them. Explain this." Daniel had thought about this moment many times since the attack. He had rehearsed answers in his head, trying to find the right words to explain something that seemed so obvious to him. But now, standing before this ancient ruler, all his prepared speeches disappeared. "They were children," he said simply. "They were scared and alone and in danger. I could not walk away from that." "But they are not your children," the Queen said. "They are not even your species. In all the universe, there is no bond between your blood and theirs. Why would you sacrifice yourself for creatures that mean nothing to you?" "They do not mean nothing to me," Daniel said, and he felt a spark of defiance rise in his chest. "They are alive. They feel fear and pain just like anyone else. That is enough. That is always enough." The Queen leaned forward on her throne. Her massive head came closer to Daniel, and he could see the intricate patterns on her scales, the way her eyes reflected the light like fractured jewels. "In Valkyrie society, males do not protect young that are not their own," she said. "It is not in their nature. Only bonded males, those connected to a queen through the sacred rituals, feel the drive to guard the offspring of their line. An unbonded male would never risk himself for another's children. It would be like asking him to stop breathing." "I am not Valkyrie," Daniel said. "Humans are different. We protect children because they are children, not because they belong to us. All children? Even the children of your enemies?" Daniel thought about this. He remembered stories from Earth's history, soldiers who had saved children from the ruins of cities they had just bombed. He remembered the way strangers would rush into burning buildings to rescue babies they had never met. He remembered his own students, none of them his own flesh and blood, and how he would have done anything to keep them safe. "Yes," he said. "All children. It is what we are." The Queen was silent for a long moment. The entire chamber held its breath, waiting for her judgment. Then she raised one of her massive limbs and gestured to someone behind Daniel. He turned and saw attendants approaching, carrying the familiar container that held the 3 larvae. His heart clenched at the sight of them. They were pressing against the walls of their container, reaching toward him, making those soft cooing sounds he had come to know so well. "Watch," the Queen commanded. The attendants opened the container, and the larvae immediately began moving toward Daniel. They climbed over each other in their eagerness, their tiny limbs grasping at the air. One of them, the smallest of the 3, reached him first. It climbed up his leg and his arm until it was nestled against his chest, making a sound that was almost like purring. The crowd gasped. "Hithri," the Queen said, and her voice was softer now. "My youngest daughter. She has imprinted on you." Daniel looked down at the small creature against his chest. She was warm and surprisingly light, and she was looking up at him with complete trust in her dark eyes. "Imprinted?" he asked. "It is a bond that forms between a Valkyrie child and their primary protector," the Queen explained. "It is usually the mother or a designated guardian. It has never, in all our recorded history, formed with someone of another species. Until now, What does that mean? The queen rose from her throne. Even from this distance, her movement sent tremors through the floor. The crowd parted as she descended the steps of the platform, and for the first time, Daniel realized just how massive she truly was. She towered over him like a mountain. It means, Daniel Carter, that my daughter has chosen you. Her mind has reached out and found safety in yours. She believes you will protect her, and nothing will change that belief. Nothing. Daniel looked at Kithri. She was still making that purring sound, her tiny body pressed against his heart. I do not understand, he said. What do you want me to do? The queen lowered her head until her eyes were level with his. This close, he could see intelligence and emotion in those alien depths. He could see a mother's love and a mother's fear. I want to offer you a choice, she said. You may return to your people and your ship. We will honor you for what you have done and send you home with our gratitude. Kithri will grieve, but she will survive. In time, she may even forget. She paused, and Daniel felt the weight of thousands of years of history pressing down on him. Or you may stay. You may take a place in my court as the guardian of my young. It is an honor that has never been offered to any non-Volcari. You would be the first. You would spend your life here, among my people, raising and protecting my children as if they were your own. Daniel felt the world tilting beneath his feet. He thought about Earth so far away. He thought about his empty apartment and his lonely life. He thought about Clara and how she had always wanted children. And he thought about the small creature in his arms, the one who had chosen him when she could have chosen anyone. How long do I have to decide? He asked. The queen straightened to her full height. The treaty ceremony is in 2 days. I will have your answer then. She turned and walked back to her throne, leaving Daniel standing alone in the center of the room with an alien child nestled against his heart. Daniel spent 4 days in the Volcari Medical Bay. The doctors were fascinated by him, studying his wound and his recovery with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. They had never treated a human before, and they kept taking samples of his blood and tissue for analysis. He did not mind. They had saved his life after all. The plasma burn on his back was healing slowly. Volcari medicine was advanced, but their bodies were so different from human bodies that the doctors had to improvise. They consulted with human physicians through communication channels, comparing notes and arguing about treatment options. In the end, they managed to repair most of the damage. There would be a scar, they told him. A large one, covering most of his upper back. Daniel did not care about scars. The larvae came to visit him every day. Their attendants would bring them in their container and set it beside his bed, and the small creatures would press against the transparent walls, cooing and chirping whenever Daniel looked at them. The attendants watched these interactions with expressions that Daniel could not read. On the 3rd day, Commander Vethener came to see him. You are healing well, the commander said, standing at the foot of the bed with his hands clasped behind his back. The physicians say you will make a full recovery. That is good to hear, Daniel said. He tried to sit up, but the movement pulled at his wound, and he fell back with a grunt of pain. Do not strain yourself, Vethener said. There was something almost like concern in his voice. You have done enough. What happened to the attackers? The pirates? Dead or captured. The Kreth Syndicate will not trouble us again. We have sent a message to their leaders that was very clear. The commander's eyes glittered dangerously. No one threatens the Queen's offspring and lives to profit from it. Daniel nodded. He did not feel sorry for the pirates. They had been willing to kidnap children for money. They deserved whatever punishment the Volcari gave them. There is something else, Vethener said. His voice became more formal, more careful. The Queen has demanded your presence. As soon as you are able to travel, you will be taken to the surface to appear before her. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Am I in trouble? I know I was not supposed to be in that section of the ship. Vethener made a sound that might have been a laugh. Trouble? Human, you saved the lives of 3 royal larvae, the Queen's own children. If you were Valkyrie, you would be elevated to the highest ranks of our society. But I am not Valkyrie. No, the commander agreed. You are not. And that is what makes this so unusual. The Queen has never personally summoned a non-Valkyrie before. In 300 years of her reign, it has never happened. You will be the first. Daniel did not know what to say to that. He looked at the larvae in their container. They were watching him with those huge dark eyes, and one of them was making a soft humming sound that seemed almost happy. Why do they keep bringing them to see me? He asked. Vethener was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strange. They asked to come. The attendants say they become distressed when they are separated from you for too long. They have never done this before with anyone outside the royal family. Daniel reached out and pressed his hand against the container. The larvae clustered around the spot where his palm touched the transparent surface, their tiny limbs reaching toward him. They are just scared, he said. They went through something terrible. They probably see me as safe because I protected them. Perhaps, Vethener said, but he did not sound convinced. On the 5th day, Daniel was well enough to travel. They dressed him in simple clothes and put him on a shuttle that descended through the golden clouds of the Valkyrie homeworld. The planet was beautiful in a strange, alien way. Vast hive cities rose from the surface like mountain ranges, their spires reaching toward the sky. Rivers of light flowed between the structures, and the air was filled with flying vehicles of every size and shape. Ambassador Linda Hayes was waiting for him at the landing platform. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she looked worried. Daniel, she said, taking his arm and guiding him away from the Valkyrie escort. How are you feeling? Sore, but alive. What is happening? Why does everyone look so nervous? Hayes lowered her voice. The Queen's summons has thrown everything into chaos. The negotiations were already delicate. The attack on the ship made things worse. Some of the Valkyrie Council members are blaming us for failing to protect the larvae. They want to cancel the treaty. But I saved them, Daniel said. Does that not count for something? That is exactly the problem. Hayes looked around to make sure no one was listening. You were in a restricted area without authorization. Technically, you violated the terms of our diplomatic agreement just by being there. Some people think the Queen wants to punish you publicly to satisfy her council. Daniel felt his stomach drop. So I might be executed for saving her children? I do not know, Hayes admitted. Nobody knows. The Queen has not explained her reasons to anyone. All we can do is present you to her and hope for the best. They walked through the hive city in a procession of guards and officials. The Valkyrie people stopped to stare at Daniel as he passed. He was probably the first human most of them had ever seen. They pointed and whispered among themselves, and he heard the translator in his ear, catching fragments of their conversations. That is the one. The human who shielded the young. He looked so soft, so fragile. How did he survive? They say he threw himself in front of a plasma bolt. No Valkyrie male would do such a thing. Daniel kept his eyes forward and tried to ignore the attention. He thought about Clara, about how she used to hold his hand when he was nervous. He missed her so much in that moment that it was hard to breathe. Finally, they reached the entrance to the royal palace. It was a massive structure that seemed to grow out of the ground itself, its walls made of some material that pulsed with inner light. Guards in ceremonial armor stood at attention as Daniel approached, and the doors swung open to admit him. Inside, the palace was both beautiful and overwhelming. The ceilings were so high that Daniel could barely see them. The walls were covered with murals depicting scenes from Valkyrie history. and the air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers. They walked for what felt like hours, passing through chamber after chamber, each one more impressive than the last. Finally, they came to a set of doors that were larger than any Daniel had ever seen. They were made of solid gold, and they were carved with the image of a Valkyrie queen holding her offspring. "This is the throne room," Hayes whispered. "Remember to bow when you enter, and do not speak unless the queen addresses you directly." Daniel nodded. His heart was pounding, and his hands were sweating. He wiped them on his trousers and took a deep breath. The doors opened, and Daniel Carter, maintenance engineer from a small town in Ohio, walked in to meet the ruler of an alien civilization. The door flew across the chamber and crashed into the far wall. Smoke poured in, thick and acrid, burning Daniel's eyes and throat. Through the haze, he could see 3 figures in black armor stepping through the ruined doorway, their weapons raised and ready. Daniel did not move from his position. He kept his arms spread wide, his body between the attackers and the larvae behind him. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, but his hands were steady. He had made his choice. "Step aside, human," the lead attacker said. His voice was distorted by his helmet, cold and mechanical. "Those creatures are coming with us. You do not have to die for them. They are children," Daniel said. His voice was calm, calmer than he felt. "I am not letting you take them." The attacker laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Children? They are bugs, insects. Their mother will pay half her treasury to get them back, and that is all they are worth to us. Now move, or I will shoot through you to get to them." Daniel thought about Clara. He thought about the children he had taught, the way they used to run to him when they were scared or hurt. He thought about all the years he had spent running away from pain, hiding from anything that might make him feel again. He was done running. "No," he said simply. The attacker raised his weapon. Daniel saw the glow of charging plasma and knew he had only seconds left. Behind him, the larvae were crying again, their tiny voices filled with terror. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. The shot never came. Instead, there was a crash from the corridor, followed by the sound of energy weapons and screaming. The attackers spun around, suddenly facing a new threat. Through the smoke, Daniel saw tall figures moving with impossible speed, their bodies covered in gleaming dark armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Valkyrie soldiers. The battle was brief and brutal. The Valkyrie fought with a fury that was almost frightening to watch. They moved as one unit, each warrior knowing exactly where the others would be. Within moments, 2 of the attackers were down, and the third was being dragged away in restraints. Daniel stayed where he was, still shielding the larvae with his body. He did not know if the Valkyrie would see him as a threat. He did not want to make any sudden movements. A Valkyrie soldier approached him. This one was larger than the others, with silver markings on his armor that indicated rank. He stopped a few feet away from Daniel and studied him with multifaceted eyes that reflected the emergency lights like shattered mirrors. "Human," the soldier said. His voice was deep and resonant, translated by a device on his collar. "You may stand down. The threat has been eliminated." Daniel slowly lowered his arms. His legs were shaking, and he had to lean against the wall to stay upright. The adrenaline that had been keeping him going was fading fast, leaving him weak and dizzy. "The larvae," he said. "Are they okay?" "I tried to keep them safe." The soldier moved past Daniel and examined the 3 small creatures in their nest. They had stopped crying and were reaching their tiny limbs toward Daniel, making soft cooing sounds. "They are unharmed," the soldier said. There was something strange in his voice, something Daniel could not identify. "You protected them." "Of course I did." "They were scared. They needed help." The soldier turned back to Daniel. Those alien eyes studied him for a long moment. And Daniel had the uncomfortable feeling that he was being evaluated in ways he did not understand. "I am Commander Vethner of the Royal Guard," the soldier said. "You will come with me. The Queen will want to know about this." Before Daniel could respond, another attacker burst through a side door that no one had noticed. He must have circled around through the maintenance tunnels. His weapon was already raised, aimed directly at the larvae. Daniel did not think. He moved on pure instinct, throwing himself in front of the nest just as the attacker fired. The plasma bolt hit him in the back, and the world dissolved into white-hot agony. He fell forward, landing on top of the larvae, still trying to shield them, even as his body screamed in pain. He could smell burning flesh, his own flesh, and he knew the wound was bad. But he could also feel the larvae beneath him, alive and unharmed, their small bodies warm against his chest. Commander Vethner killed the attacker with a single shot. Then he was at Daniel's side, shouting orders in a language the translator could not keep up with. More soldiers arrived. Someone was trying to turn Daniel over, but he would not let them. He kept his arms wrapped around the larvae, protecting them even now. "Human," Vethner said, and his voice was different now, softer somehow. "Human, you must let go. We need to treat your wound. Promise me," Daniel whispered. The pain was making it hard to think, hard to speak. "Promise me they will be safe." There was a long pause. Then Vethner said something that Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. "You have my word, human. I have served the Queen for 60 years, and I have never seen anything like what you did today. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." Only then did Daniel release his hold on the larvae. He felt them being lifted away from him, heard their distressed cries as they were separated from their strange protector. Then gentle hands turned him over, and he saw Vethner looking down at him with an expression that might have been wonder. "Why?" the commander asked. "They are not your young. They are not even your species. Why would you die for them?" Daniel tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace of pain. "They were scared," he said again. "They needed someone. I was there." Vethner shook his head slowly. "In all my years, I have never seen a male protect young that were not his own. This is not how nature works. This is not how anything works." "Maybe," Daniel said, and his vision was starting to blur around the edges. "Maybe that is just how humans work." Then the darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. When he woke, he was in a bed that was too large for him, in a room that smelled of strange medicines and hummed with unfamiliar machines. Everything hurt, but he was alive. That was more than he had expected. He turned his head and saw the 3 larvae in a transparent container beside his bed. They were watching him with those huge dog eyes, and when they saw him move, they began to coo and reached toward him with their tiny limbs. "Hello, little ones," Daniel whispered. "I am still here." And despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the uncertainty of what would come next, he smiled. Daniel Carter had never wanted to be anywhere important. He liked fixing things. He liked the quiet hum of machines and the satisfaction of making broken systems work again. That was why he had taken the job as a maintenance engineer on the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge. It was simple work. It was honest work. Nobody bothered him, and he bothered nobody. The ship had been orbiting the Velkari homeworld for 3 days now. Important people in expensive clothes walked through the corridors, speaking in hushed voices about treaties and trade agreements and the future of humanity among the stars. Daniel avoided them. He kept to the lower decks, crawling through access tunnels and replacing worn components. He ate his meals alone in his small cabin and read old books on his tablet before falling asleep. He had been a teacher once, back on Earth, elementary school, 3rd grade. He had loved those children with all his heart. But then his wife Clara had gotten sick, and everything had changed. After she died, He could not look at the children anymore without thinking about the family they would never have. So he left. He learned a new trade and took a job that would carry him far away from everything that reminded him of her. That was 5 years ago. Now he was 40 million light years from Earth, and the memories still followed him. On the 4th day of the mission, Daniel received an alert on his work tablet. There was a malfunction in Section 7, Deck 12. The environmental controls were failing, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. He gathered his tools and made his way through the ship, taking the service elevators that the diplomats never used. Section 7 was in a restricted area. Daniel had the clearance to enter for maintenance purposes, but he had never been there before. The corridors were wider here, and the walls were covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at them. Valkyrie decorations, he guessed. This must be the area where the alien delegation was staying. He found the malfunctioning unit behind a wall panel and went to work. It was a simple fix, just a frozen relay that needed to be replaced. He was finishing up when he heard something strange. It was a high-pitched sound, almost like crying, coming from somewhere nearby. Daniel knew he should ignore it. He should finish his job and leave. But the sound was so sad, so helpless, that he could not walk away. He followed it down a side corridor to a door that was slightly open. Inside was a chamber filled with soft blue light. The air was warm and humid, and there was a sweet smell that reminded Daniel of honey. In the center of the room, resting on a bed of woven fibers, were 3 small creatures. They were about the size of human infants, with pale segmented bodies and tiny limbs that waved weakly in the air. Their eyes were large and dark, and they were making that crying sound together. Valkyrie larvae. Royal offspring, if the golden markings on their bodies meant what Daniel thought they meant. And they were alone, with no guards and no attendants. Daniel stepped closer, his heart pounding. The larvae turned their heads toward him, and the crying grew louder. They were afraid of him. Of course they were. He was an alien to them, a strange and terrifying creature. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller. He remembered how he used to calm frightened children on their first day of school. He spoke softly, even though he knew they could not understand his words. "Hey there, little ones. It is okay. I am not going to hurt you. You are safe." Something remarkable happened. The crying stopped. The larvae tilted their heads, watching him with those huge dark eyes. One of them reached out a tiny limb toward him. Then the world exploded. The blast threw Daniel against the wall. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Emergency lights flashed red, and he could hear shouting in the distance, mixed with the sharp crack of weapons fire. He pulled himself up, his ears ringing. The larvae were screaming now, a piercing sound of pure terror. Daniel looked at them, and something deep inside him made a decision before his brain could catch up. He could not leave them. Whatever was happening, whoever was attacking, he could not abandon these helpless creatures. He ran to the door and looked out into the corridor. He saw figures in black armor moving through the smoke, carrying weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Pirates, raiders. He had heard stories about the Kreth Syndicate, criminals who operated in this region of space. They must have infiltrated the ship during the negotiations. One of them spotted Daniel and raised his weapon. Daniel ducked back into the chamber, just as a blast of plasma scorched the wall where his head had been. "There are young ones in here," someone shouted. "The Queen's offspring. Grab them. They are worth a fortune." Daniel's blood ran cold. They were here for the larvae. They would take these children and hold them for ransom, or worse. He looked around the chamber desperately, searching for anything he could use. There was a control panel near the door. He ran to it and began working, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. He could not read the Valkyrie symbols, but engineering was engineering. He found the door controls, and sealed the chamber. Then he found the environmental systems and overloaded them, creating a barrier of superheated air in the corridor outside. It would not hold for long, but it would buy them some time. The larvae were still screaming. Daniel went to them and knelt beside their nest. He did not know what else to do, so he did what he would have done for any frightened child. He gathered them close to his body and held them gently, careful not to hurt their delicate forms. "I have got you," he whispered. "I am right here. Nobody is going to take you. I promise." He felt something strange then, a warmth spreading through his chest, and emotions that were not his own: fear, confusion, and then, slowly, a growing sense of safety. The larvae were pressing against him, their tiny bodies trembling, but their cries fading to soft whimpers. Outside, someone was pounding on the door. The metal was beginning to glow from the heat of plasma cutters. "Open this door, human. Give us the young ones, and we will let you live." Daniel did not answer. He positioned himself between the larvae and the door, his back to them, his arms spread wide. He had no weapon. He had no armor. He had nothing but his own body, but that was enough. That was all he had ever needed to protect the children in his care. He had failed Clara. He had failed at the life they were supposed to have together. But he would not fail these little ones. Not today. The door began to buckle. Daniel took a deep breath and steadied himself. Whatever came through that door would have to go through him first. And Daniel Carter, maintenance engineer, former teacher, lonely widower lost among the stars, discovered that he was not ready to die. But he was ready to fight. He was ready to protect. Because some things were worth more than his own life. And the helpless creatures huddled behind him were 3 of those things. The door exploded inward, and Daniel did not move.